The 911 call came at 11:47 p.m. from a Palo Alto mansion worth $37 million. "She's not breathing," the voice trembled through the phone. "There's so much blood." By morning, Silicon Valley's most powerful CEO sat in handcuffs, his tech empire crumbling as news vans lined his driveway. He had everything money could buy: private jets, political connections, a company worth billions. Yet none of it could stop him from destroying the one person who mattered most. But what drives someone who controls algorithms that shape millions of lives to lose complete control of his own? What pushed a man with everything to risk it all for revenge? You are about to find out. Welcome to True Crime Journal HQ. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay with us for daily update on the most shocking true crime stories. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Isabella Whitmore wasn't born into privilege. She grew up in Cedar Falls, Ohio, where her mother taught third grade and her father fixed cars at the local garage. Their modest two-bedroom house sat on Maple Street, where neighbors knew everyone's business, and Friday night football games were the biggest events of the year. At 17, Isabella was already turning heads. Standing 5'9" with striking features, she dreamed of something bigger than small-town life. Her high school yearbook predicted she'd light up Broadway, but Isabella had her sights set on the fashion capitals of the world. 2 weeks after graduation, she packed everything into a beat-up Honda and drove to New York City with $800 and fierce determination. The first year was brutal: waiting tables, sleeping on friends' couches, facing rejection after rejection. But Isabella possessed something that couldn't be taught, an undeniable presence that made photographers stop mid-shoot. By 23, she'd appeared on 3 Vogue covers and walked runways for Versace and Chanel. Fashion insiders called her the girl next door with supermodel magic. She commanded 6-figure contracts and lived in a Manhattan penthouse, but success came with a price: 18-hour days, constant travel, and relationships that never lasted. Everything changed at a 2011 charity gala in Manhattan. While other models networked with photographers, Isabella found herself drawn to the quiet intensity of a tech entrepreneur from California. Alexander Whitmore was different from the fashion world men she'd known: brilliant, focused, and genuinely interested in her thoughts about sustainable fashion initiatives. Their courtship was a whirlwind of private jets to Napa Valley, weekend trips to his Lake Tahoe cabin, and long conversations about changing the world through technology and philanthropy. When Alexander proposed on a Malibu beach at sunset, Isabella said yes without hesitation. The wedding made headlines: a fairy tale ceremony at a Carmel Valley vineyard with celebrity guests and $1 million reception. Isabella traded her modeling career for Silicon Valley society life, becoming a patron of children's charities and hosting fundraising galas that raised millions for education initiatives. But the tech world was isolating. While Alexander worked 16-hour days building his empire, Isabella found herself alone in their massive Palo Alto estate, surrounded by luxury but starved for genuine connection. Alexander Whitmore's story began in Seattle, where his father sold insurance and his mother worked as a nurse. Even as a kid, Alexander was different. While other children played video games, he was taking them apart to understand how they worked. At 12, he built his first computer from scratch. By 16, he'd developed a program that predicted stock market fluctuations with 70% accuracy. His parents thought he was destined for a stable engineering job at Microsoft or Boeing. Stanford University offered Alexander a full scholarship, but by sophomore year he was already bored with coursework. The real learning happened in his dorm room, where he spent nights coding revolutionary algorithms for data analysis. His professors called him brilliant. His roommates called him obsessed. In 2001, Alexander made the decision that would define his life. He dropped out to start Nexus Dynamics in his parents' garage. His father was furious, calling it the stupidest mistake of your life. His mother cried for weeks. But Alexander's vision was crystal clear. While other companies focused on consumer products, he saw the future in artificial intelligence and predictive analytics. Nexus Dynamics would help corporations make smarter decisions by analyzing massive datasets in real time. The first 5 years were relentless. Alexander worked 90-hour weeks, sleeping on his office couch, eating nothing but energy bars and coffee. He missed family gatherings, friendships, and any semblance of normal life. But by 2006, Fortune 500 companies were paying millions for Nexus technology. Success transformed Alexander from a driven entrepreneur into something more troubling. He monitored employee emails, installed surveillance cameras throughout the office, and required loyalty oaths from senior staff. Friends noticed his need to control every conversation, every social situation, every aspect of his expanding empire. When he met Isabella, he was initially charming and attentive, but marriage revealed his darker tendencies, tracking her phone, questioning her friendships, and gradually isolating her from anyone who might challenge his authority. Have you ever felt trapped in a seemingly perfect life? Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. But Isabella's picture-perfect life was about to become a nightmare. David Kellerman wasn't looking for trouble when he walked into Nexus Dynamics in January 2023. The 34-year-old Wharton MBA had built his reputation managing operations for Fortune 500 companies, turning chaos into profit with surgical precision. His resume was flawless. Harvard undergraduate, McKinsey consultant, 3 successful corporate turnarounds that saved thousands of jobs. Alexander needed someone exactly like David. Nexus Dynamics was hemorrhaging money on bad investments, while Alexander obsessed over every line of code instead of business fundamentals. The board was getting restless, and Alexander's paranoia was affecting company morale. David's interview lasted 3 hours. Alexander grilled him about everything from quarterly projections to his personal philosophy on loyalty. "I don't hire people," Alexander told him. "I hire solutions." David got the job that afternoon with a salary that made his Wall Street friends jealous. The first meeting at the Whitmore estate should have been routine. Alexander's home office occupied the entire 3rd floor of their 12,000-square-foot mansion, overlooking Silicon Valley's sprawling tech campuses. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered million-dollar views, but the space felt cold, sterile, more like a corporate boardroom than a home. Isabella brought coffee during their second hour of reviewing investment portfolios. She'd done this hundreds of times for Alexander's business associates: smile politely, serve refreshments, disappear. But David did something different. He stood up, extended his hand, and actually looked at her when she spoke. "Mrs. Whitmore, your husband mentioned your work with literacy programs. That's incredible. Education access is what changes everything." His genuine interest caught Isabella off guard. When had anyone last asked about her philanthropic work instead of just complimenting her dress? Alexander barely glanced up from his laptop. "David, the quarterly reports need your attention," he interrupted, dismissing Isabella with a wave. Over the following weeks, David became a fixture at the estate. Alexander trusted him completely, finally someone who understood both spreadsheets and strategy. David streamlined operations, renegotiated vendor contracts, and freed Alexander to focus on product development. But David noticed what Alexander missed. During late-night strategy sessions, Isabella would bring dinner and linger, clearly hungry for adult conversation. She'd ask thoughtful questions about market trends, offer insights that impressed David with their sophistication. Here was a woman with a brilliant mind, trapped in gorgeous isolation. Alexander would interrupt these moments without fail. "David, the Shanghai deal requires immediate attention," he'd announce, effectively ending any meaningful dialogue Isabella had started. David began arriving early for meetings, knowing Isabella would be in the garden or reading by the pool. Their conversations started professionally, discussing foundation investments, charity event logistics. But David's attention was intoxicating for Isabella. He remembered details about her childhood, asked follow-up questions about her interests, treated her opinions with respect that had vanished from her marriage years ago. Have you ever met someone who completely changed your perspective? What do you think Isabella should have done differently? The Palo Alto mansion, worth $37 million, became a stage for this dangerous triangle. Its marble floors echoed with loneliness, despite containing every luxury imaginable. The infinity pool reflected empty skies, expensive artwork hung on walls that witnessed increasingly awkward silences between husband and wife. If you are enjoying this content, like, subscribe, and share it with your loved ones to protect them from the same tragedy happening to them in the future. What started as innocent coffee meetings would soon ignite a passion that would cost Isabella her life. By March 2023, David's business meetings had evolved into something more dangerous. What began as coffee in Alexander's office transformed into lunch meetings at quiet restaurants in nearby Menlo Park. Isabella would claim she was attending foundation board meetings, while David cited client consultations that required his immediate attention. Their first real date happened during Alexander's week-long trip to Tokyo. David suggested discussing charity investments over dinner at a small Italian restaurant in Saratoga, far from Silicon Valley's gossiping elite. Isabella wore a simple black dress she hadn't touched in years, feeling like herself for the first time in decades. "Tell me about Ohio," David said over wine, leaning forward with genuine curiosity. Isabella found herself sharing stories she'd never told Alexander, about her father teaching her to change oil, her mother's terrible cooking experiments, the small-town dreams that felt both naive and precious now. When David walked her to her car, the kiss happened naturally. For Isabella, it wasn't just physical attraction, it was the intoxicating feeling of being truly seen, truly valued, truly heard. Their secret weekends began in May. While Alexander traveled to conferences in Berlin and Singapore, Isabella and David would escape to Napa Valley's boutique wineries or Carmel's secluded beaches. David would book separate rooms, maintaining the illusion of propriety, but their connection deepened with every stolen hour. Isabella began buying clothes she actually liked, instead of the conservative outfits Alexander preferred. Her hair grew longer, her smile returned, and she started expressing opinions during social gatherings instead of standing silently beside her husband. Friends noticed the change. Isabella seemed alive again, vibrant in ways they hadn't seen since her modeling days. The danger excited her as much as the romance. Leaving lipstick on David's collar during business meetings, texting him from charity events, scheduling foundation meetings at hotels where they'd spent afternoons together. Isabella was playing with fire, but the warmth felt worth the risk. Silicon Valley's social circles began whispering by summer. At the annual tech summit in August, Isabella was spotted laughing with David during cocktail hour, while Alexander networked across the room. At the Children's Hospital Gala in September, sharp-eyed socialites noticed how David's eyes followed Isabella throughout the evening. "She looks happier than she has in years," one philanthropist murmured to another, but that's not necessarily good news for Alexander. Alexander first noticed the changes in June. Isabella had changed all her passwords, phone, laptop, even her online shopping accounts. When he casually asked about her new security measures, she claimed concerns about identity theft. His tech genius instincts sensed deception immediately. The late-night phone calls started in July. Isabella would step onto the balcony for foundation business that couldn't wait until morning. Alexander tried accessing her cell records, but discovered she'd switched to a private plan he couldn't monitor. His wife was hiding something, and his business-trained paranoia began consuming him. "She's different," Alexander thought during a September board meeting, unable to concentrate on quarterly projections. The way she dresses, the way she speaks to me, the way she disappears for hours claiming charity work. His natural suspicion, the same instinct that protected Nexus Dynamics from corporate espionage, now focused entirely on Isabella. Alexander hired Mitchell Associates, Silicon Valley's most discreet private investigation firm, on September 15th. The retainer cost $50,000. "I need to know everything about my wife's activities," he told them. The photographs arrived 3 weeks later. Isabella and David at Auberge du Soleil in Napa Valley, sharing dessert and holding hands. Isabella entering David's room at l'Auberge Carmel while Alexander was supposedly in meetings. David's car parked at the Whitmore estate during times when Alexander's calendar showed him at the office. Each image felt like a physical blow. Alexander stared at pictures of his wife kissing another man with passion she hadn't shown him in years. The betrayal was complete. Not just romantic, but professional. David had been in his home eating his food, earning his trust while destroying his marriage. Alexander's behavior became erratic. He cancelled important meetings, spent hours reviewing security footage from his home cameras, and began following Isabella to verify her alibis. His assistant noticed him muttering to himself during phone calls and staring at documents without reading them. Friends grew concerned when Alexander missed his own company's product launch, claiming food poisoning while actually sitting in his car outside a restaurant where Isabella was having lunch with David. Has something like this happened in your community? What would you do if you discovered your partner's betrayal? But Alexander's discovery would trigger a chain of events that would shock Silicon Valley forever. October 27th, 2023. The fog rolled in from San Francisco Bay like a gray blanket, muffling sounds and obscuring the expensive homes of Palo Alto's elite neighborhoods. Alexander's flight from Los Angeles was supposed to land at midnight, giving him perfect cover for what he'd been planning for weeks. The Samsung conference had been cancelled that morning due to the keynote speaker's sudden illness. Alexander could have called Isabella, could have told her he was coming home early. Instead, he sat in LAX for 6 hours, letting rage crystallize into something harder, more focused. His Uber dropped him at the estate's back entrance at 9:47 p.m. The fog was so thick, he could barely see the fountain in their circular driveway. But David's midnight blue Tesla Model S sat parked exactly where Alexander's investigator had photographed it before, close to the house, confident, almost mocking. Alexander stood in his own driveway, hands trembling not from cold, but from pure fury. The private investigator's final report lay open on his phone. Subject and Mrs. Whitmore have been intimate in the master bedroom on 3 separate occasions during your business trips. Recommend immediate legal consultation. The front door opened silently. Alexander had disabled the security chime months ago to monitor Isabella's movements without her knowing. Every step across the marble foyer echoed like gunshots in the silence. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows through the fog-covered windows. Voices drifted down from the second floor. Laughter. Isabella's laughter, bright and genuine in ways Alexander hadn't heard in years. He climbed the mahogany staircase one step at a time, each creak of the wood marking his transformation from betrayed husband to something far more dangerous. The hallway stretched before him like a tunnel, leading to their bedroom where warm light spilled from beneath the door. Alexander pressed his ear against the wood. Isabella was telling David about her childhood dog, a story she'd never shared with her own husband. Their intimacy was worse than physical betrayal. It was emotional replacement, total substitution of one man for another. When Alexander opened the door, Isabella's scream shattered the mansion's expensive silence. They were sitting on the bed, fully clothed, sharing a bottle of wine and what looked like photo albums. Innocent enough to fool a jury, devastating enough to destroy Alexander completely. "Alexander," Isabella gasped, wine spilling across white silk sheets. "Your flight, you said midnight." "Cancelled," Alexander said quietly, stepping into the room. His voice was steady, controlled, the same tone he used during corporate takeovers. "David, I think we need to discuss your employment contract." David stood immediately, hands raised in surrender. "Alexander, listen, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" Alexander's laugh was hollow. "Because it looks like my business manager is drinking my wine in my bedroom with my wife while I'm supposed to be 300 miles away." Isabella rose from the bed, her face pale but determined. "Alexander, we need to talk. About us. About our marriage. About what's been missing." "What's been missing?" Alexander's composure cracked like glass. "I gave you everything. This house, your charities, a life most women only dream about. And you threw it away for him." The first blow came without warning. Alexander's fist connected with David's jaw, sending him crashing into the antique dresser. Isabella's wedding photos tumbled to the floor, glass exploding across Persian rugs worth more than most people's cars. "Stop!" Isabella screamed, throwing herself between the two men. "Alexander, please, we can work this out." But Alexander was beyond reason now. The careful control that built his empire had completely shattered. In his mind, Isabella wasn't his wife anymore. She was a corporate asset that had been stolen, a contract that had been breached, a problem requiring immediate solution. David struggled to his feet, blood streaming from his mouth. "Isabella, run," he managed to say. "Get out of here now." What happened next unfolded in terrible slow motion. Alexander grabbed the crystal decanter from their nightstand, a wedding gift from Isabella's parents that had sat untouched for years. The weight felt perfect in his hands, solid and final. Isabella saw the change in her husband's eyes, the moment when love transformed into something unrecognizable. "Alexander, no, please, no." The crystal connected with Isabella's temple with a sound like breaking bells. She collapsed instantly, her body crumpling beside their bed like a discarded dress. David lunged forward, but Alexander was faster, stronger, consumed by rage that gave him inhuman strength. The second blow, then the third. Crystal shattered, wine mixed with blood, and Silicon Valley's fairy tale couple became a crime scene. In the silence that followed, Alexander stood over his wife's body, crystal fragments cutting his hands, not feeling the pain. The fog outside seemed to press against the windows like curious ghosts, and somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. David, barely conscious, had managed to call 911 with his shattered phone before passing out from his own injuries. Have you ever witnessed someone completely lose control? What could have prevented this tragedy? The most shocking revelation came later. Alexander had prepared for this moment. Police found zip ties in his car, plastic sheeting in the garage, and a freshly dug hole behind the garden shed. This wasn't just rage. It was premeditated murder interrupted by David's survival and quick thinking. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. If you made it to this point, drop a comment with "I'm still here." Let's see who is still watching. Detective Maria Santos had worked homicide for 15 years, but nothing prepared her for the scene at 1247 Edgewood Drive. The mansion's marble floors were stained with blood and wine, crystal fragments glittered like deadly diamonds, and Isabella Whitmore lay motionless beside her marriage bed. Alexander sat in the corner when police arrived, still holding the broken decanter, his expensive suit soaked in his wife's blood. He offered no resistance during the arrest, staring blankly as officers read him his rights. His only words, "She made me do this." David Kellerman survived, but barely. Rushed to Stanford Medical Center with severe head trauma, he spent 3 weeks in intensive care before he could provide testimony. When detectives interviewed him, David broke down completely. "I should have seen the signs," he whispered through bandaged lips. "I should have protected her." Silicon Valley's reaction was immediate and brutal. Nexus Dynamics' stock price collapsed within hours of Alexander's arrest. Board members scrambled to distance themselves from the company they'd once proudly served. Tech journalists who'd written glowing profiles about the power couple now competed to expose the darker truth behind their perfect facade. The trial began in March 2024, drawing international media attention. Court TV covered every session as prosecutors presented Alexander as a controlling monster who'd finally acted on his violent tendencies. Defense attorneys argued temporary insanity, claiming the shock of betrayal had triggered a complete psychological break. David's testimony was devastating. Over 3 days on the witness stand, he described Alexander's increasing paranoia, his surveillance of Isabella, and the terrifying calculation in his eyes during the final confrontation. "He didn't just snap," David told the jury. "He'd been planning this." The most damaging evidence came from Alexander's own devices. Police found detailed surveillance logs, private investigator reports, and a disturbing journal where Alexander had written, "If I can't have her, no one can. That's basic economics." On June 15, 2024, Alexander Whitmore received life in prison without possibility of parole. The verdict was unanimous. 12 jurors agreed that wealth and betrayal didn't justify murder. Alexander showed no emotion as the sentence was read, staring at the defense table as if calculating quarterly projections. Nexus Dynamics filed for bankruptcy within 6 months. Without Alexander's leadership, the company lost major contracts and faced numerous lawsuits from shareholders. 3,000 employees lost their jobs, pension funds collapsed, and Alexander's revolutionary AI algorithms were sold to competitors for pennies on the dollar. Isabella's parents, Thomas and Linda Morrison from Ohio, became unlikely advocates for domestic violence awareness. They established the Isabella Whitmore Foundation, focusing on helping wealthy women escape controlling marriages. "Money doesn't protect you from abuse," Linda told Congress during hearings about domestic violence in affluent communities. David relocated to Portland, Oregon, changing careers from business management to nonprofit work. He underwent intensive therapy for survivors' guilt and post-traumatic stress, eventually becoming a counselor for domestic violence survivors. "I lived through something that claimed Isabella's life," he said in his only public interview. "I owe it to her memory to help others recognize the warning signs I missed." The tech industry began serious conversations about the psychological costs of extreme success. Corporate wellness programs expanded to include mental health screening for executives, and business schools started requiring courses on emotional intelligence and relationship management. Silicon Valley's elite social circles changed forever. The charity galas and networking events where Isabella once smiled and served others now include mandatory presentations about recognizing controlling behavior and supporting friends in dangerous relationships. What warning signs should people watch for? How can we prevent tragedies like this? The most haunting question remains unanswered. Does extreme wealth corrupt the human capacity for love, turning partners into possessions and betrayal into capital crimes? In high-pressure careers where control means survival, where does ambition end and obsession begin? Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you are enjoying this content, like, subscribe, and share it with your loved ones to protect them from the same tragedy happening to them in the future. Isabella Whitmore's story didn't end with her death. It began a conversation that could save lives. Her journey from small-town Ohio to Silicon Valley tragedy reminds us that domestic violence crosses all economic boundaries. Wealth doesn't protect victims. Sometimes it makes escape even harder. If this story impacted you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear Isabella's message. Your share could help someone recognize dangerous patterns in their own relationships or support a friend who's struggling with controlling behavior. Subscribe to True Crime Journal HQ for more stories that matter. We don't just tell tales of tragedy, we explore the warning signs, the missed opportunities, and the lessons that could prevent future victims. Ring that notification bell so you never miss an update. Drop a comment below. What other true crime cases would you like to see covered? Are there stories from your community that deserve attention? Your suggestions shape our content and help us shine light on cases that need telling. Share this video to spread awareness about domestic violence. Remember Isabella Whitmore, not just as a victim but as a woman whose story continues protecting others. Thank you for watching True Crime Journal HQ. Stay safe, stay aware, and keep each other protected.